Hey guys, welcome back to That GD Show. There's Genevieve. I'm Dave. Hello everyone. How you doing, G?
I'm good. We were cutting it close down to the wire, but I'm glad that we made it.
We were scrambling, a couple minutes late tonight, folks. Sorry about that, but we're here. We're ready to rock and roll. We're gonna, before we bring our special guest on tonight, we'll chat a little bit about what we, some of the stuff we like to do, the housekeeping we like to do. The obviously, if you haven't subscribed, we appreciate you doing that. It helps us in ways I don't even understand. Like also helps us somehow.
Makes us feel good.
Yeah, it makes us feel good. You know, it's all about, this world's all about likes. Mm-hmm. It is a call-in show. What's that number to call in, Genevieve?
You can call 217-375-9933.
And we'd love to hear from you tonight. If you have a question for our guest, or something you want to talk about, we pretty much just leave it wide open unless there's a subject matter that we're on in a particular night. But tonight we're really not. We're just talking with our guest about his content, his story, all those things. So anything you guys want to chat about with him or us, we're wide open. And as always, oh gosh, there's our guy, Greg Markowski, right out of the gate with that Super Chat 1999. Dave, loved you on some other show yesterday. Yeah, some other show.
Some other show.
You and Secular Rarity were almost as good as you and Genevieve. Thanks for the show tonight. By the way, Secular Rarity and I co-hosted the Atheist Experience yesterday. And I'm pretty sure that was his first time to do it. He was just great.
Oh, I was going to say, Greg Markowski, I love seeing your name every single time we open the show. It brightens my day. But I'm going to call that a bold-faced lie because I have done shows with Secular Rarity and they're phenomenal. So funny, so witty, so sharp.
Just a very natural, just excellent show yesterday. I really enjoyed
Blush away.
Doing that show. He's in the chat just saying, oh, you two, stop it. So anyway, what we also do every week, well, not every week, but most weeks, we've got this trivia contest going. It's become great fun for our regular viewers. I hear from some of you in messages that, oh man, I just missed it this week. I was just wire to wire on the answer. So it is basically whoever gets the answer in the chat first. And sometimes it can be a really close. Hello, Anton Gomez, best guest ever. Yes, Mexico. Thank you for your super chat, 25 Mexican dollars. We really appreciate y'all supporting the super chat. Appreciate your support for Patreon. If you're not a Patreon supporter of Dying Out Loud, the organization that puts this show on, my organization, appreciate your support. We do a lot of stuff like this, travel and speak, and we're going to talk about some of those events coming up tonight on the show. But back to my book, because that's on everybody's mind. That's all anyone's talking about is my memoir, because I think it's the best book ever written. There it is. There's that beautiful little book. By the way, that cover picture is myself leaning through the window of a Volkswagen Bug, I don't know what year, to kiss my beautiful mother. And that picture was probably taken at about 1958. So that dates me. But my book, Childish Things. So what we do, we have a trivia contest. So tonight's question is this. And Genevieve, as always, if you get it in the private chat, you're going to get a separate signed mug from me, but I'm probably going to give you one of those anyway. So
I was going to say, I got it last week. I still have not gotten my mug yet, so I'll blame UPS. But
okay. But you have to beat the actual answer. You can't just get it. I don't know about that. Anyway, you do. So tonight's question is, it's from early in the book as well. During my time running a coffee house called the Hosanna House, clever name, we had a Christian band come in and play. And who was the lead singer of that band, who went on to become a top contemporary Christian artist a few years later for quite a few years, was one of the biggest and best-selling contemporary Christian music artists, period. So who was the lead singer of the band that we brought into Hosanna House? By the way, if you get it and you've already won, you don't qualify, Darren. I said, I'm blowing it. I'm blowing it bad. So Ronald Reagan is not the right answer. But that's a great guess, by the way, because he was an incredible Christian rock singer. So next one to get the answer right in the chat wins that. So we appreciate, we do that just for fun. And if you haven't gotten my book, it would be great if you'd go ahead and get it. We appreciate that support. And if you want a signed copy of the book, which a lot of people have asked me about, you can just email daveoutloud@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to get that to you. I see some good guesses, but no. There it is. Greg Markowski, you were just barely behind Darren last week, and this week you do win. Good for you, Greg. Greg's such a great supporter. We appreciate that so much.
I didn't know it this week. And I'm so happy to lose to Greg Markowski. I can't think of a more deserving winner. So thank you.
Yeah, Jeff Moore was a good guess, and Carmen was a good guess. Bill Castle, thank you for that $20 super sticker. Genevieve, I think I've babbled enough, so I think we should, unless you have something on your mind that you want to talk about before we bring our guest on.
No, I'm just so excited for our guest. I'm like jumping out of my seat.
Me too. So we want to welcome everyone. None other than the Holy Kool-Aid himself is with us tonight, Thomas Westbrook. Hey, Thomas, what's up?
It's great to be here. Good to see you guys again.
Yeah, we're so thrilled to have you on, man. I really can't believe we've been doing this show since September. We're just now getting you on. So my apologies. I've been wanting to for so long.
Well, you've been busy writing books and touring the country. I can't blame you.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Yes.
There's more important things than talking with this old mug.
No, nothing more important than that. So welcome, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just hanging in there. I'm getting ready for a conference that's coming up called Better, which I think I heard word that you might be attending as well here in a couple weeks in Indiana. So
we're gonna, in fact, I think we've got a link to that we're going to be putting in the chat and the show notes. There it is right there. That comes up in less than 2 weeks in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You're speaking, I'm speaking. We've got some incredible lineup, actually. We've got Dr. Josh Bowen. We've got Shannon Q and Paula Gia and Cynthia McDonald. And I'm going to miss, Seth Andrews. You may have heard of him. Who else am I forgetting, Thomas?
Well, there were several new speakers that got added in addition who are pretty big on TikTok. I know Biddy Buddha.
Oh, that's right, Biddy.
Heathen Queen.
Yes, Heathen Queen, Biddy Buddha.
And obviously the Tang gang they're the ones that are putting it on. So Oz and Jenna Mew will be there. Yeah. And so hopefully I didn't forget anyone else. But
no, I think that covers it. Yeah. So I'm super stoked about that. That's going to be a great time.
I believe that Ethan, your friendly neighborhood atheist, might be coming down.
I heard a rumor.
I've heard a few other content creators tossing around the idea and may show up. So you never know who you might bump into there, whether they're on the speaker's list or not.
That's true. And that's the great thing about these conferences, right, Thomas? In fact, Ethan says he will be there. So come and meet your friendly neighborhood atheist. Truly one of the best dudes out there. I mean, he is such a good guy. But yeah, hanging out with meeting people. I know you and I, we first met at the Recovering from Religion fall excursion last year.
We did.
And Ethan was there as well. He surprised me, blew my head off. But
and then Faithless Forum right after that, all of us got together. So It's
You
just
were
like
nice
a
enough.
traveling reunion.
And it's so great. These conferences are great to hear the talks and the panels and the presentations. There's always good stuff there, but as good as that, and maybe even better in my book, is just the hangout time, just getting to have some quality downtime, just to chit chat, get to know each other better. So if you know how to drop that. If you live anywhere near Fort Wayne, Indiana, am I clever or what? If you live anywhere near Fort Wayne, Indiana, guys, get there. It's the 25th and 26th, right, Thomas?
Yep.
Of June. So coming up in less than 2 weeks.
Actually, in about like right after this show at around 10 o'clock, I think over on Oz's channel, he's doing a couple of promos. So if people are worried about not being able to afford tickets, there's some free tickets going on sale, and there's a good chance you could win some of those. So
yeah, good call. In fact, I'm going to jump over onto that as soon as we're done here tonight. We'll be about a half hour late, but that's a good. Yeah, I just saw that today, Thomas. So I'm glad you mentioned that. He's doing some ticket giveaways. And I see Neil, the 604 Atheist, in the chat. Hey, brother.
Neil's going to be there too.
Well, apparently, because he said, if I bring the book, will you sign it? You betcha, buddy. Are you coming? Awesome.
He said on Twitter he was.
That is so cool. Genevieve, you got to get there, girl.
I know. I am so in the dark. I found out about this because I was tagged in a TikTok by another creator who said, hey, for all of us out here who totally missed the big conference in Atlanta, why don't we get together in Indiana? But alas, I have friends from North Carolina visiting that weekend, so I will not be there, and it breaks my heart.
Well,
I'll make it to one of them one of these days.
You will. Maybe come to Nashville. We're doing NanoCon the end of July, but we'll have more information on that. But
I might be at that one as well. I'm on the fence about it.
Yeah, so. I was going to say, I was hoping you could get to that one too.
I've been invited, and I'm deciding. There's also here in Texas, there's the Freedom from Religion conference this coming fall, and because that's
San Antonio,
it's in my backyard, sort of. I most likely will be at that one, and PsyCon is another big one, and Dragon Con has their skeptic track. So there's just conferences popping up all over now that COVID is, kind of trickling down.
Yeah, we had a great time getting to meet some people, some of the TikTok content creators at the American Atheist Conference. Some of those I met for the first time there back in February. When was that? Anyway, so that's good. Yeah, conference is coming up. Those are fun, and so we'll be able to see you guys there, whoever's coming. But holy Kool-Aid, this is funny too, because I was kind of doing some deep diving on some of your videos that I hadn't seen before. And you got a lot of them, man. You have a lot of content. You are just a rock star in that world.
Yeah, and how long have you been doing this
now? About 6 years. I technically put out my first video in 2015, which would be 7 years ago. But I wasn't doing content full time. I released one kind of low quality video and then just went for months and months, and then kind of did another one, and then decided that I wanted to do it more seriously and kind of got into it. And actually learned what I was doing without, completely. I watched my first video, and there were so many things that I was clipping on my volume with the mic and all this other stuff, and it was rough. But
yeah, you got to start somewhere.
6 years, you come a long way.
So you've been doing it full time for about 6 years.
Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. It really is, and so good for you, man. It's good. It's great. But what I was looking at was one of your early ones. Well, not early, but maybe it was early. You were talking about your deconversion story. And you talked about that debate between Bill Nye and Ken Ham. And I've heard many people refer to that debate as a pivotal moment. And when you said that it was like mic drop for you, it's like, I'm done. I think you said you yelled, I'm done, or something at the screen, or what'd you say? I forget.
Well, so I had a bunch of moments leading up to that were kind of dominoes that were, planting seeds of doubt. And I had always been told this idea that there's so many Christian scientists who are, they're championing the truth, and they really want to go out there and follow the evidence, and the evidence is just as clear in favor of Christianity. And if you really just follow those people. You know, they've got some good information. Don't just listen to all the scientists that are trying to deceive you.
Right.
And Answers in Genesis is like kind of the Goliath figure in the world of young earth creationism. They're the ones that go out and try to find all of these rogue scientists and bring them together and push back against evolutionism or evolutionism. And when I watched that debate, there was a question that was posed to Ken Ham, who's the leader and the founder of this organization. And it was also posed to Bill Nye. And the question was, what, if anything, would ever change your mind? And Bill Nye, in a moment of humility, was like, just any one piece of evidence that goes against the, this mountain of evidence. If we find something that debunks it, if we can falsify this and show that it's not true, I will change my mind. I'll turn on a dime. I want to go where the truth is. And then they posed the exact same question to Bill Nye, and his answer was, nothing is ever going to convince me that the word of God, that the Bible is not the inerrant, perfect, infallible word of God. And it was just this super blatantly obvious moment where just all of this stuff, and I know that that's one person and that doesn't necessarily represent every Christian or every Christian organization or every believer who's a scientist. I understand that. But the way that it had been, kind of played up to me, I had been seeing one by one these various scientists that were, so intellectually honest, that were doing really, really deceptive, shady things to try to win people over to the gospel. And they were trying to circumvent science. One example of this is one of the geologists that works for Answers in Genesis took these samples of freshly like cooled magma. And so he's like, oh, look, it's a brand new rock. We're going to send it off to all these labs and get them to test it and show that carbon-14 dating isn't accurate. And the way that he collected the samples, he like just kind of scooped it up and had all these like contaminants in it, which included in that was these little zircon crystals that don't melt in lava. And so like they're going to have a considerably older age. So he's like scooping up all these contaminants with it, sends it off, doesn't tell any of the scientists at the lab like how he got it or where he got it or the methods to separate out the contaminants or anything. So they
Genevieve.
They just take these rock samples, and the guy's name, by the way, I think is Andrew Snelling. They take these samples, and the scientists do what any scientist would do. Someone says, hey, can you date this rock? They're like, okay, we'll date the rock. He requested it. And they came up with these different dates, and different labs are dating different parts of the samples and getting different dates because he's not using good scientific rigor in this process. And so then they start trumpeting this as this, see, carbon-14, you can't trust it when they come up with these old dates that are older than 6,000 years old. It's not reliable. And
Genevieve's head's exploding.
Well, my head's exploding because you cannot carbon date rocks because carbon is organic matter. So, like, that whole thing is just dumb from the beginning, but also the age of something isn't going to change just because it changed states going from a liquid to a solid to a gas or whatever. It's the same. Sorry, there's so many things that could really make my head explode about this. But I think, a big problem that I've seen with Answers in Genesis and what is it, like the International Creation Researchers, like the ICR group or whatever their acronym is, and a lot of these,
the Institution for Creation
Institute for
yes,
Creation,
thank you. And a lot
which
of
is
these,
a smart sounding name, by the way.
yeah. But the thing that is so frustrating about them and a lot of these religious universities is that to work there, you have to sign a statement of faith. And so no matter where the research leads you, it cannot contradict that statement that you've already signed. It's essentially saying that I agree that I have found the conclusion already, and all of the work that I do will never contradict that, no matter what I find. And it is so sad because when you have believers who have genuine questions that they want answered, of course they're going to lean to these godly organizations that are just deliberately misleading them, regardless of what the Bible says about being honest or anything like that.
And at that point in your life, Thomas, these were genuine questions. You were looking for truth, I guess. And they seemed disingenuous to you, is what you're saying. It sounds like.
I was very open to going wherever the evidence led at that point. There
Yeah.
was, when I was younger, it was basically the Bible's true no matter what. You start with that. If something contradicts it, then it must not be true. You must not have the full picture. And as I got older, I kind of reached a point where I was more open to parts of the Bible being, possibly metaphorical and not literal. And I kind of went down that route a little bit. And I wasn't eager to throw it all out. I still valued it. I was raised in. My community was all religious. And I kind of made this gradual shift. And then I reached a point where I was like, okay, you know what? Truth withstands scrutiny. So we shouldn't be afraid to ask these questions, because if it's true, then no matter how much we investigate, it's just going to be vindicated. Right. But if it's not true, I don't want to spend my entire life following a lie, no matter how comforting or reassuring. I want to find out how the world actually works. And so because of that kind of gradual mental shift, as I started watching TED Talks and taking, science courses and reading different books and stuff that conflicted with the religious stuff that I had been taught, I was much more open to exploring those avenues and not just like throwing up a wall and saying, no, I can't look at that because that's from the devil. And as I explored it, I wanted to understand it. It wasn't just, oh, hey, here's some authority figure that's saying it, so I'm going to just dogmatically accept it the way I have with my faith. I wanted to understand, why do people believe these things? Why is this the scientific consensus? Is it that they're actually being dishonest? Because I think I'd be able to spot that if I saw, what the evidence that they had was and how they were drawing their conclusions and it didn't follow, then I would be able to expose that and debunk it and be, this great warrior for God that would be basically doing what I'm doing now on my channel with Holy Kool-Aid, except with Christian content, exposing these people who are spreading misinformation, and trying to go against God's plan and God's will. So I was very open to exploring what the evidence and the data showed and how they were getting to those conclusions, so that I could understand it and break it apart in my mind and figure out, are these people lying or are they being honest? And it's not something that you just overnight, like you read one book and all of a sudden you understand all of it. It's you're diving into so many different overlapping fields of science, and you're getting this big picture, and all of this evidence is converging on one specific theory. And it's not just hey, here's a little bit of evidence that on its own might support it, but then this over here doesn't, or well, this does and this does, but the rest of it doesn't. It all works together. They all come together. And what I've found with the Bible and with my faith and with this Christian narrative, especially the young earth creationist position, was that you might be able to form some kind of model over here that could stand up on its own to one criticism, and you kind of warp it in such a way as to be able to use apologetics and jump through all kinds of backbends to defend this intellectually. But then it falls apart when you do that in another area. And so you're constantly having to play this game where you kind of distract from one problem to answer another, but by answering the other, you're making yourself vulnerable to the first problem, and you can't have a position, a sound position within the biblical framework that stands up to scrutiny from all of the different data points that are all contradicting it. And that's, to me, just as the more that I learned about all these other fields, the house of cards just started falling. And that moment where Ken Ham was like, nothing's ever going to convince me, was just this like blatant admission of intellectual dishonesty, where I was just like, so done with this. Because up until that point, I've seen so many other people doing that in Christian circles, apologists and pastors and stuff, they were more concerned about saving souls and the faith and protecting the faith than they were about whether or not it was actually true. And when I saw that level of dishonesty, that was kind of the last straw for me. Where I was just done. I'm out.
My story was similar in that it's a series of events. It's a 1,000 little cuts, and then there's that one final thing that just says, "Oh no, this doesn't make sense." What's interesting about that moment is you mentioned Tracy Moody, the woman who asked that question, it ended up sounding like a gotcha question, but it really wasn't. I know Tracy; she's a really good friend of mine from Nashville, and she told me about she was working for Bill Nye some at the time, I think.
Yeah.
But it was a genuine question. She was genuinely curious. Is there something each of you have that would change your mind? It wasn't a gotcha question, but Ken Ham turned it into one because it exposed exactly where he's at and the inflexibility of his position, regardless of what new information comes down the pike. And that's just very telling. And so it's not unusual. I've actually heard several people that mentioned that debate was a big turning point for them.
Specifically that question. I've
Yeah,
had
that
people
moment
that specifically point to that question. And it was really cool because when I was at the American Atheist conference back in North Charleston, South Carolina, for the solar eclipse, they were showing the documentary, the Bill Nye documentary there, and Tracy Moody was there along with some of the documentary creators. And I got to get up and basically like on the mic, like thank them for that.
Oh, that's great. You led me away from God.
Yeah, and then I had dinner with Bill Nye at SciCon in Vegas one time, and in that conversation I brought up the same thing, and he was kind of like, yeah, I got a lot of flack for that debate. People were saying I shouldn't have done it, and I was like, those people were wrong, don't listen to them. Like,
yeah, he did. I'm supposed to be speaking at the ARC protest in Kentucky, where they do it every year to protest the state funds being used to build the ARC. So if I get a chance to talk to Ken Ham, I'll let him know that his answer drove you away from Christ. So, hey, I've got a call I want us to get to. I see Kim Possible, your 666 donation. Thank you. Planning to get to the Nashville conference in July. Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. I hope to see you there. Let's take a call from Alex in Michigan. He, him, has a question about Christian radio. Hello, Alex. You're on with Holy Kool-Aid, Genevieve, and Dave.
Hey guys, this is Alex from Michigan. I interact with Holy Kool-Aid sometimes on Twitter and whatnot.
Cool.
My family actually owned a Christian radio station in Michigan here from 93 to 06. So I got to rub elbows with some big shots in the industry, or at least moderate shots in that industry at the time. And my major question tonight is just, you already mentioned AIG, and we got mailers and CDs to play from AIG and Focus on the Family. But that view, and you kind of explained it about Bill Nye's interview, but do you view like the Christian media industry as anything as other than like some sort of exploitative group compared to what you saw them as before?
Well, Genevieve probably didn't have any experience with Christian radio or Christian media, but
No. My experience was flipping through the stations, trying to find NPR and hearing somebody go on about praise Jesus and just thinking Jesus Christ myself. But
what about you, Thomas?
Yeah.
Was that what did you have? I guess being raised up in fundamentalism, that's all you listened to was Christian radio, right?
Not entirely, because I grew up overseas. I was a missionary kid.
That's right.
And so we didn't have Christian radio. This was before internet radio. I'm showing my age. But we did have Christian music, and we got like the Christian book catalog, and we got stuff from Focus on the Family, and we would buy all the Adventures in Odyssey,
Oh yeah.
Both the old cassette tapes that you would listen to as
Yeah.
VHS tapes. And in addition to that, we had, Veggie Tales and all the different stuff that, Christian kids would watch growing up in the 90s. And so I had all of that stuff, and there was part of me where like it did kind of feel like it was very much a business, but I didn't necessarily see Focus on the Family as exploitative as a kid. I did see the Christian televangelist prosperity doctrine. I can't talk today. Prosperity doctrine. Say it 10 times fast. Pastors who are saying, if you just, pray really hard and give me, way more than 10% of your money, then, God's going to take that seed that you plant and make it just, explode off, and all your debts are going to be paid. And for me, that was something that my family was very opposed to, and my parents kind of spoke out against and said, like, yeah, that's not biblical. Those people are they're con artists in a way. They're using the message for their own gain.
Right.
And so I did see some people as exploitative, but I didn't think it all was. And I still don't think that all religious people are exploitative. You know,
No, not at all.
Runs a really, really small church, makes almost nothing and has for, decades, and gives back to her community. So like, I don't think she's there for the money by any stretch. But
yeah, I agree with that. I think people who broad brush the Christian community as a bunch of charlatans, there are those for sure. The Joel Osteens and the Kenneth Copelands and those people. But by and large, the majority of the people, like you said, Thomas, are hardworking, true, genuine people who are trying to serve God and serve their little flock. And most of them don't make much money. Mm-hmm. In fact, I've known many pastors who have second jobs, and they do it as bivocational. And so, yeah, there's a mixed bag. I was going to ask you, Alex, I guess you were a Christian when your parents had that Christian radio station.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So what did you?
There was no choice in that matter.
Yeah. And what did you think of the Christian artists that you would interact with? Did they seem genuine to you, or how old were you during that time, by the way?
So I was like 4 when they started the station, and then they sold it my freshman year of high school is when it finally went through. So like my entire childhood was like dedicated to that. Like we were, my parents mostly, but we went a couple times to the Dove Awards in Nashville as media reps, or we'd go to the Kingdom Bound Traveling Festival at the Six Flags in New York State, and we have to go and sit in front of certain concerts for upcoming bands for Forefront, the big record company for Christian artists at the time. Yeah. And so like you interact with these people, and some of them just like, yeah, I'm like just this thing of I'm here, I'm having fun, but some of them just seem like I'm here, like that inflection of yes, I'm here. Like I'm not going to have food on my table if I don't show up.
Yeah, I have to do this tour.
There's
right.
There's definitely some normal music industry buffoonery going on, but like when we did a lock-in at the local university, New Year's Eve of 2001 with Skillet, like that was right when Alien Youth came out, and they were, John Cooper at the time. I was like, I would have been 9. He seemed like a cool guy, but now I've seen some of the stuff he's posted and talked about. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I looked up to this dude. Yeah. And I just see that as a perversive theme, because once you step out of line, you get ashamed. Like Hawk Nelson and Under Oath, those bands, once they made statements or admitted something that they did wrong, they got shunned.
What did Under Oath admit?
Drug abuse. They were having drug issues, and so they got kicked from one label. And so and then they came back with a label they could swear on. And had much more fun.
Because I met, I think, what's his name? Aaron Gillespie, the lead singer of Under Oath.
Yes, that sounds right.
I met him. He was doing like a solo show because he kind of did his own band for a little bit. And when I was doing a Christian fraternity at Texas A&M, we brought in some different bands. And one year we brought in Cutlass, and one year we brought in Aaron Gillespie from Under Oath. And I just remember him being kind of a dick, and like, that may have been.
But he was a Christian dick. To be fair, he's a Christian dick. So
Yeah, but like at the time, I was like super religious and Christian, and like I had this idea, this kind of false idea that people in ministry, people in worship, like they're just like they're just flowing out with like this joy of the Spirit, and then he was just kind of like. I came up to like say hi to him, and he just like gave me like this look. He's like, whatever, and just was very standoffish. And it just felt
idols, man.
It felt like it was more like, I'm just here because I have to be. Like this is just it's performative,
It is a business. I'm guessing, Alex, at that age when the trivia answer tonight was Russ Taff. I guess you knew who that was. From back in those days.
Yeah, I recognize that name. I recognize that name. The stuff that we played was like my dad focused on the Christian rock at the time. So like Jeff Morwood and Distance, which was my answer, was like the lightest that we played. Like the first album of Audio Adrenaline was like hot at first. We did the Carmen stuff in the early 90s. went into the ska phase with a bunch of believers. I had a Christian rap night in the mid 90s in a town that's 90% white. So like we were for the industry very ahead of our times.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm from Nashville, so I spent a lot of years in Nashville. I don't live there now. I'm in Charlotte. But in Nashville, if you're a Christian in Nashville, you go to church in these churches and you end up meeting a lot of these Christian artists. So I listened to them when I was younger, and then when I moved to Nashville, I started meeting these people, and Michael W. Smith and Amy Grant and the DC Talk guys. I mean, all of these people, Stephen Curtis. So and you do find out a lot of them they're just humans and they got problems, and they don't have their shit together any more than anybody else. They're getting divorced. They've got drug problems. They're alcoholics. They're partying after their shows on the road. I mean, there's a lot of shit you find out from behind the scenes that kind of bursts your bubble in terms of looking up to them as any kind of a spiritual influence. It's a business. It's a business.
And Dave, this is also exactly what South Park touched on.
Yeah.
Is that it is so difficult to make it as a musician, but you're going to have a much easier time if you decide to make worship music or even just play in a church. Like, that is a really solid gig for struggling musicians. It's like, you don't have to be a believer, but you can definitely go play every Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, it's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Christian musicians don't retire. They just become worship pastors at churches. That's literally what happens almost exclusively. Well, that's a good call. It's fun to talk about that, Alex. I'm assuming you've deconverted and got out of that Christian nonsense, right?
Yeah. After I went to a very conservative college in Michigan that isn't named Hillsdale, and started working at a Fortune 500 company that really treated people like junk, and watching all the economic stuff that happened, I'm like, no, just everything just kind of coalesced. And I'm like, nope, I'm done.
The secret is God is in control. He's just kind of a dick and doesn't care about us.
Or God was in
That's
control
true.
and he was guiding you out of this toxic religion.
Yes, exactly. Yes. God led you out by listening to a Christian apologist named Ken Ham. That's funny. Well, I appreciate your call, Alex, and thanks for listening and tuning in tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet, man. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. And we do have lines open. If anybody wants to call, it's 217-375-9933, which is WWDD, which is What Would Dave Do? Dave would call the show and talk to Holy Kool-Aid. That's what he would do. So tell us a little bit, you touched on it, but give us your backstory. You were raised fundamentalist, homeschooler. What's the Thomas Westbrook story? Yeah.
I had very religious Christian parents. So most of your viewers, if they have any kind of background either in Christian homeschooling or in Christian like ultra sheltered evangelical communities, they're probably familiar with the A. Becca and Bob Jones homeschool.
Oh, wow. That's so conservative.
Yeah. And A. Becca, basically, it's produced by Pensacola Christian School, which is this university, I think, in Florida that is ultra conservative. Like, they wouldn't even let people listen to music with headphones, like college students. They wouldn't let college students have headphones until just a couple years ago because they were worried that they might be listening to some genre of music other than
my God,
hymns, worship, and classical. Like, even Christian rock was off limits. It was
right.
And so this is the organization that's creating the Young Earth Creationist textbooks that's talking about all of the amazing evidence for Noah's flood and how, oh, look, there was even a guy that found Noah's Ark and his name is Ron Wyatt.
Right.
And it's just these horribly, demonstrably false, debunked things that they're teaching as curriculum to kids all over the world. Like, there are millions and millions of students who are taking this homeschool curriculum and using it and learning from it, and then coming out the other side as radical fundamentalist evangelicals that are, starting Christian talk shows and starting Christian, churches and different foundations and getting the word out there and protesting at abortion clinics. And like, it's
right.
this is where it's coming from. It's starting with places like Pensacola that's raising up kids on this propaganda, and that's what I had as my daily curriculum. And some of the stuff wasn't religious at all. Some of it was, like I had geometry textbooks that really had nothing in them religious. It was just like, hey, here's how you do a proof. And so I kind of lucked out in that regard, because there are some homeschool kids who don't even get that. Basically, their parents are like, you know what? We're going to teach you how to read the Bible. And once you know how to read, then you're just going to memorize the Bible, and we're going to, pray and worship and read the Bible until Jesus.
That's all you'll ever need. Right.
And these kids wind up woefully unprepared. Especially, I see it a lot with ultra sheltered women who, because they're told like, well, you don't really need to get a job. You just need to marry a good Christian man. And Jesus is coming back soon anyways. So you have these women that are locked into the system. And even if they realize that they're starting to doubt and question it, where do they go? Their whole community, their whole, backup structure, their safety net is the church and the religious community. And if they're married to a very fundamentalist Christian man, and then if like they don't have any skill set to be able to get a job outside of that, they're set up for failure. They're locked into this.
Well, in that world, you as a woman, you're not even working outside the home is frowned upon. You are to be a wife and a mother, and a helpmeet. That's pretty much what you're trained for.
Which in that regard, I think my family was a little bit more progressive.
It sounds like they were,
families, because I not only got to, get a decent education. Like I did okay on my SATs. I scored above average on the SATs, and I got accepted into a university, and I graduated with honors from a university, and my parents helped me through college financially. So in that regard, it's not like they were like, hey, and even when it came to university, I went first to a private Christian school, to Laterno University in Longview, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a Christian school. We had chapel all the time and stuff. But then I transferred to Texas A&M, which is still a pretty conservative school, but it's public.
Yeah.
And, they still, the quality of the education is good, but most of the people in the area are fairly conservative. You do have, I knew quite a few people who were gay or who weren't religious or who were, it was more so than at like Christian schools, and people could, drink and party and stuff. But for me, the fact that my parents, my dad went to A&M back in the 70s. And so he was a little bit more open to, it's not a big deal if you, but I was the only one in my family who went to a private university or a public university.
Yeah.
So,
and many people in that world are if not, it sounds like your parents were quite, what denomination were you in?
So it's a little tricky, because my family was a part of an organization called YWAM.
Oh yeah, I know YWAM.
Mhm.
Yeah,
and YWAM, it's not technically associated with one denomination. It's like a multi-denominational group.
They have to raise their own support, right?
Yeah, it got started with Assemblies of God,
right?
And which is a very like almost Pentecostal
flavor,
healing, prayer, demons,
speaking in tongues,
yeah, all of that. And so that was very much kind of an ever-present thing. The Bible is literal. Young Earth creationism, miracles, and spiritual warfare was something that was just commonplace, talked about, as real. I never really saw things like miracles couldn't be explained naturally.
Yeah.
But
me too. I always believed in it, but never looking back, never, you kind of think, okay, yeah, that guy's walking a little better because we prayed for him. But those kind of vague things that you can't really.
Yeah, I had a stomach ache, and then they prayed over me, and a couple hours later, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah. Well, that world is not always, not opposed to education. Sometimes some of them are, because there's a lot of people in that evangelical fundamentalist world who realize that you can go get too educated, and you can educate faith right out of yourself. So there's a little bit of a fear of young people going off to college and learning things that will lead them away from the faith.
The ironic thing there, though, is because I heard that notion as a kid that, well, be careful of those liberal colleges, those public schools, because they'll indoctrinate you,
Right.
they'll brainwash you. And the fact of the matter is, when it comes to indoctrination and brainwashing, like, sure, you can fall prey to it, and anyone can find themselves in a cult. But what I found was that because the formative years of your life, when you are 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, and your brain hasn't fully developed, you haven't really built up the neural pathways yet that allow you to think critically and analyze things and try to, like, not just trust, not just believe it because your parents, who are the authority figure, tell you to believe it,
Right.
not just emotionally latch onto something, but actually, like, critically think through it. You don't really even have the capability to think critically until you're in, like, your later teens and your 20s. You start to kind of develop the hardware that you need.
Frontal lobe, right.
And so when I started going off to college, and I started realizing that the things that I'm being taught, I'm not being taught something dogmatically. I'm being taught why people came to certain conclusions. I'm simply being shown evidence that had previously been obscured from me, and facts and information that I had previously not known. And then I've been shown the methods that people used to come to these conclusions. And I was taught how other conclusions were shown to be false, and how, science is a self-correcting mechanism. Scientists don't always get everything right, but it's by using this method of, postulating this hypothesis and testing it and trying to falsify it and trying to improve upon it, that over time, it's never perfect, but it's this idea of fallibilism. It's okay for us to make the best guess we can, but make some mistakes because we can correct it, and that's encouraged to try to expose these. It's not there's not this idea of, like, infallibility,
Right.
perfect dogmatic source that it all comes down from, which I got in religion. And so that this dichotomy and this contrast between the two ways of accepting something as true was in stark contrast to the notion I had been raised with, that the propaganda and the brainwashing came from these non-religious university sources, as opposed to the religious stuff that I had literally just had shoved in my brain and forced to repeat over and over and memorize without even necessarily knowing what it was, going to church and, like, just chanting the words and singing the songs.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I did sincerely believe it and emotionally, like, felt it and thought I had experienced the Holy Spirit, it was still indoctrination. It was still brainwashing. I was still
Right.
a child. I was still repeating what I was told to repeat. There were still authority figures and pastors who were up there, and that was the person you were supposed to trust because he's the smartest guy in the room and he's telling you what the Bible says. And even if there were times when, my parents said, well, I didn't quite agree with what the pastor said that day, it was still a very ripe method for creating a system of indoctrination, dogma, and it was cult-like in that regard.
Now, are your parents still with YWAM?
I am not going to comment on anything related to it or where they are right now. That's
Sure. That's
an area
fair.
of privacy. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, how do they feel? I mean, you can answer or not. I'm just curious because you began to develop this content, this YouTube channel. That is well. Let me ask you, Genevieve. You've seen Holy Kool-Aid's YouTube channel. How would, if someone asked you what is the content that Holy Kool-Aid creates? What is it? Explain it to me. Define it. How would you define it?
I find it difficult to define, but what I would say is that it's fantastic. You have an incredible way with words, and it all sort of comes down to this idea of intellectual honesty and having enough respect for yourself to ask questions and to be full of critical thought. I mean, and I love how you touch on that, not just when it comes to religion, but also to politics and relationships and sort of like that overarching theme. I like to think that if I were religious, I wouldn't be offended by it. I don't think that it's very offensive. I think that you come off very respectful and just very genuine and understanding. But that said, I know I sort of lived the opposite experience. I grew up very, very secular, progressive by atheists, sheltered in my Bay Area bubble before moving to the Bible Belt and discovering Christianity. And so there would often be things that I would say that I thought were perfectly respectful and innocuous, and was shocked when people were grossly offended. Like when I said Christian mythology. I didn't know that was a big no-no until I got yelled at.
Yeah.
So I might have some blind spots as far as how religious people might take your content, but
I think you straddle a line. You straddle that respectful line really, really well, because you do go to great lengths to really unpack, if you will, the problems with evangelical or Christian thinking, and whether it's the Bible or Christian history or archaeological issues. You really do dig into that in great detail, but it's never in a bashing with a bashing mindset. You're not making fun of it. You're not poking fun at it. You're very respectful, and I think that's because you came out of it and understand why these people think that way, right?
I mean,
is that kind of where you're at?
The goal is not to attack people. It's
Right.
not to tear people down or to call them stupid. And every once in a while, I'll come across someone who maybe deserves to be knocked down a peg because they're being horrible and awful and toxic.
Greg Locke.
Even then, and one example of that is I helped organize a peaceful protest outside of a Make America Straight Again conference that was advocating for the death penalty for gay people.
Wow.
So I felt like that wasn't a situation where
that's fair game.
Spotlight kind of needed to be shined on something that I thought was really harmful.
Yeah. Well,
and
go on.
Even then, the goal is not this person is bad, let's just focus on this person and the things that they're doing. The goal is, what is the ideology behind what's causing this person to behave in this way? Because this person's not alone. This person isn't an outlier. There are others like them. Not every Christian, not every believer. But this person didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to hate gay people.
Right.
They arrived there. And I want to know how. I want to know if they're reading the same Bible that I was, but they were born in a different place with a different pastor and different interpretations. Exactly. Or they simply took it more literally. Or maybe they're saying out loud what a lot of us as Christians maybe believed on the down low. Then is it just something that is like there, but for blind luck go I?
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, over the course of the last 6 years, I've developed a certain amount of, I've tried to develop a certain amount of compassion and understanding of people who hold different viewpoints than me. That doesn't mean that it's okay or that I am, that I would defend the toxic positions that they hold, but I want to know how they got there, because until I can understand it, I'm never going to be able to reach those people.
Yeah.
And I don't expect to reach someone like Steven Anderson or Greg Locke, but maybe some of their followers, if they see that he's being angry and hostile, and I come at it from an approach that's like, hey man, like I get where you're coming from, but here's why it's harmful. Here's why it's wrong. Here's the things that opened my eyes, and you don't have to believe this stuff. I think that's going to be a lot more effective at winning people over and changing their minds than if I'm just like, you're all bigots, and then like cancel and block them. Sometimes you just don't have the energy to engage, and I understand that not everyone has to, but if I'm in a position where I have a platform and I can talk about it in a video format I'm not having to do this back and forth where we're all getting angry and yelling at each other, but I can just present the facts in the most understandable, easy to digest way, then I'm going to try to do that.
Yeah.
So
that's really awesome.
Yeah.
I'm still listening, but I'm opening the door because it's kind of hot in here.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, you're fine.
It's a big room, big library. I can see why it's going on.
Yeah.
It goes so far back.
So something that I've actually been thinking about quite a bit lately is is it's important, I think, especially in the atheist community, to remember that, like, nobody wakes up one morning and says, like, oh yes, it's a great day for me to be a dick, I'm gonna be a villain.
Right,
Like,
right.
no, that's not how things work. Even when people believe things or do things that we find truly abhorrent, like, they are doing that for a reason, and it's because they genuinely think that they're right. And maybe I'm naive to think, the best in people, but I think that there's very few people who decide that they want to be wrong and they do that. That's just not how it
Yeah.
works. I think it's like how they say that deconstructing your religion isn't something that you choose to do. It's something that happens to you because you really can't
Exactly.
control what you believe.
Yeah,
And I
that's a
think
good way to put it, Thomas, that you want to understand how they got there, what their journey was like. I'm actually going to be talking on this subject at the Better Conference. The subject is to how to communicate with heavily indoctrinated people.
Yeah.
And what I've come to a conclusion. I want to bounce that off of you because you've studied this a lot too. It seems to me in my experience as a believer for 35 years, and then my work as an atheist in the last few years, there's in the evangelical world, and I kind of keep my conversation in that sphere because that's the water I swam in, the evangelical fundamentalist world. I don't really get off into the Episcopals and Methodists. That's a whole nother conversation to me. But in that world in itself, there seems to be basically, and it's a broad brush stroke here, basically two types. The angry ones who serve a God who is angry, who Jonathan Edwards, sinners in the hands of an angry God, the Calvinists who God is just pissed off at you all the time, and it's only because Jesus has, the fire and brimstone message, the fear of hell, the Greg Locks, the Stephen Andersons, the Westboro Baptists, that God just hates everyone and hates sinners, and you're a sinner, and you've got to, that version. And then the feel good, God loves you, wants the best for you, wants to bless you. The not as bad as Joel Osteen, but just, and when I was a preacher, that was the message, that the content of my messages was more about what God wants to do for you in your life today, how he wants to make you a better husband, a better student, a better person. What is the scripture going to show you to help you follow him more closely? And it was all about improving your walk with God in this life. It wasn't a lot of anger and judgment. So we have to I guess the point I'm making is to communicate effectively with anyone in that world. We kind of have to figure out, where are they coming from? What is their bedrock understanding of their relationship with God? Is that resonate with you, Thomas?
Yeah, and that's an area where it's very easy to call out the angry Christians and the ones where God in their mind is someone who perpetually woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
Right.
And we can shine a light on them, and there's almost a encouragement by the algorithm to promote content where you're calling that stuff out, because Twitter is an excellent outrage generating machine.
I call it the low-hanging fruit, basically.
Yeah. You say, hey, this person said something horrible, and everyone instantly is like, quote, retweet, I can't believe this, share it, blast it out to everyone, and this is Christianity. And all of the moderate Christians who are watching that go, well, this isn't what I believe, and I think that person's terrible too. And there's moderate evangelicals or ex-evangelical Christians who are moderates now that see that, and they're like, well, the God I serve is a God of love. And I think that if we want to be able to reach people at a broader level, we have to not just be like, hey, look, Christianity is synonymous with bigotry, or it's synonymous with hate, or it's synonymous with misogyny. For some people it is.
Yeah.
For some people it certainly is. And there's verses you can use to back that up. I'm not disagreeing with that. I've called out all that stuff myself. But I think that for the Christians who are more progressive, if we want to kind of show them that there's still some harm with this belief system, which I genuinely believe that there is.
Yeah.
We need to have a conversation about the dangers of having an unsound epistemology, of having a system of belief, a system of how do we discover what the truth is, that's not reliable. It's based on faith and revelation and, someone told me, some authority figure told me, or it's written in a book that the only way that the book is proven true is that the book says that the book is true, and it's circular. You don't have a reliable outsider's test of faith that can be applied to the Bible that can't also be used for other religions. And I think as we start having these conversations and we start showing better ways and better alternatives of knowing and showing how certain things have been falsified, and we talk about the science behind a lot of this stuff and the better methods, then it's like, then we're reaching them at an intellectual level, but we're not reaching them yet at an emotional level. So the question is, how are we going to get people to change their personal identity? Because these aren't just beliefs that they are taking willy-nilly and swapping in and out. These are things that are so deeply emotionally held that it's a part of their core identity. So with the people who see the angry atheists and they're like, I'm so done and sick of that, then, they might have this emotional turning point where they're like, I want nothing to do with that, and they leave the faith. But for the moderates, who most of the people around them that they see are, good, loving people, you have to still reach them at an emotional level. And I think that there are tons of stories that we can rely on to show them areas where even a moderate version of Christianity has caused people at the personal level. You tell stories, you share stories of people's lives and how they were affected in a negative and harmful way.
Yeah.
And it relates, because they're like, oh my God, like I believe all of this stuff and I had no idea that it could cause this kind of harm. And they start seeing the toxic elements of purity culture and the shame and the guilt that people are straddled with, the homophobia, the things that people read to where they want to either kill themselves, or they face violence from others, or they're told that they're different and they're odd, and they seek out, gay conversion therapy, or, moms who have 5 kids and maybe they're Christians and they're struggling with this because they just found out that they're pregnant and they missed their last period. And they're like, well, it's the size of a tiny little bean and it's a clump of cells and it doesn't have, even a working brain. And yet in my mind, that's a soul and that's a human. Can I do that? Or maybe parents who just desperately want to have a kid and they go into a clinic to get IVF and they're like, well, am I killing the fertilized embryos that are never even implanted, that are sitting there in a petri dish that's literally just like a sperm and an egg cell, that is just like, a few inches away from simply being premature ejaculation and a period. And in their mind, that's a sacred soul that is, it's a failed IVF attempt. And so is that murder? Like now their conscience is tormented, and that they have these stories of all these women that just feel terrible because they got an abortion. And it's like, but what's the alternative? You either don't have kids at all, or in the case of the person who has 5 kids already, all of a sudden now they can't afford it. They're already like, their credit cards are maxed out. And they're like, well, do I have this kid and then all the rest of my kids suffer and I can't afford to give them the care that they need and to feed them? There's like so many little elements like that where you hear these stories, and there's so many horror stories as well that I've heard that they touch you at an emotional level where it may not change their mind from like leaving religion, but it shifts them away to realize that like this book that was written in the Iron Age child, it's not necessarily the most reliable, healthiest thing to operate as a guide for our lives here in the
an ancient book written by goat herders.
And I might be a little bit pessimistic here, but I've tried to have these conversations with people before where I point out exactly why there are so many reasonable reasons why somebody would have an abortion even if they think that it's murder. Pointedly being, how many women in history have died because they tried to abort their pregnancy because they couldn't afford to feed their kids? And the common answer that I'll hear from particularly religious people is, well, God will provide. You just have to have faith, and you just do it, even if it doesn't make sense. You got to do it. And that's why, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier when Alex from Michigan called about the exploitative, nature of many religious figures, is that I don't think the majority of religious people are exploiting people, but I do think that part of the doctrine definitely is. and that's just sort of built into it. Even if you can subvert that,
Right.
it is something that is just built into the nature of religion. I mean, I know that I have friends who grew up moving constantly because they were getting evicted or kicked out of their houses, or their closed on, or there were months where they didn't have electricity or running water, and it wasn't because their family couldn't afford it, but it was because their family was tithing to the church.
Yeah.
And that's why they went over their limit, and that's why they believe that even though this thing, which I can objectively think about, is going to lead to some very real consequences for me and my family, it is my duty to brush that aside in favor of what God, and more so the religious community that I'm a part of, is telling me to do.
Yeah, real stories like that can touch people on an emotional level. That's a good point. Let's take a call, guys. Speaking of indoctrination, we've got Violet, she, her, from Washington, wants to talk to everyone. Hello, Violet.
Hello.
How are you doing? Thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Yeah, we were just talking about consequences for the different indoctrination that you were taught as a child. And I can tell you some for me that have really messed my life up. And that first one would be the original sin. Basically, I'm a bad person, at birth. So kids who believe in that truly and wholly believe that they're a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
And you always, you never feel good about yourself. And then another one was the hierarchy: God, parents, kids, or God, parents, community, and kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're always doing things for other people because you can never not have enough. There's always something you can do for other people. And so then you ignore yourself.
Right.
And so then also there was, I thought that God took my dad because I couldn't love God more than my dad.
You mean took him like
that
he died?
Hierarchy part.
You mean took your dad?
Yeah, the hierarchy part. Yeah, I thought that at 10 years old, I thought that because I couldn't love God more than I love my dad, that's why they divorced. And that's why I was ripped away from him.
Gotcha.
So it was all my fault. Yeah.
Guilt.
What's that?
And then,
guilt because
personal guilt. Yeah.
Yeah. And then after the divorce, my dad essentially ghosted us. And we couldn't get into a community for church. And so I'm heavily indoctrinated, not to mention all of the different scary movies they showed me from age 7 to 10 that made me actually split personalities at age 10.
Wow.
Because I was self-monitoring and I was self-mutilating because I didn't hear from God. Why wasn't God talking to me? Why, Dad's not here to punish me, and I need to punish myself maybe. And then at age 11, I thought that God took my voice because I sang in my dad's church after I had already broken up with God. And so I forgot I could sing for 40 years. And then at 52 years old, I'm working as a nurse in a pandemic, in infection control at a nursing home. And I just broke because the little girl inside of me thought it was the end times.
Wow.
And I haven't been able to work since October. And the only safe place I have found for myself is in karaoke. And that is because the only time that I ever felt safe was in utero. And that was when we would go to this primarily African-American church in Seattle. And the speakers were big, just like at karaoke. And you could feel the music inside. my mom. I could feel it and hear it.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying? She said that I would dance more during that one service than I did the entire week because I love gospel music. And it was a little teeny church with great big speakers. And so, you know how that permeates a person's soul. And so that was the only time that I felt safe, because once I had been born, I needed surgery, but my dad withheld medical attention because he prayed. So it was okay that I was projectile vomiting for the first 3 months of my life and choking and feeling smothered and losing weight and starving to death. By the time someone intervened, I was 3 months old and I weighed a half a pound less than my birth weight. I weighed a third of what I should have weighed. And they had to feed me through the veins in my head for 4 days before they could do the surgery. And then I got the surgery and then I was fine. And after that, my mom told my dad that no matter what, we get medical care.
Yeah. Do you feel like
So,
you at this point? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh,
That's okay.
I was just going to say, and it just snowballed my entire life. And every time something would happen, I would say I deserved it, because I'm,
a bad
I'm
person.
such a bad
That's
person.
Yeah, you
and
were taught from the beginning.
all this stuff.
Yeah, that's a horrible concept that that evangelical mindset embeds in children. That you're just a little sinner. You're born a little sinner, and that you put Jesus on the cross.
Well, and the whole showing you scary movies where people's flesh are burning off of their bodies while they're alive, and little children are being guillotined, having their heads taken off.
Right.
And you're watching that at age 7 to 10, and then all of a sudden there's no God. And so then you're self-monitoring, you're self-mutilating, you're trying to be the perfect little Christian, and you can't do it. You just can't do it. It's exhausting. So then there's the other last nail in the coffin for me was apostasy. If I leave God, I can't come back. If I leave God, I go to hell, or I get left behind and I get guillotined, or I burn to death, or whatever creative way they want to kill me. And so that's when I split, because I was like, I couldn't make that choice. And so Lori, the believer, went off to Neverland, and Lene was born. And I found that out from my mom.
Violet, do you?
I didn't even remember.
It sounds like you've gotten free from the religion itself, but do you feel like you are still being plagued by the trauma that occurred because of the indoctrination of your youth, or do you feel like you're getting free from that? How are you doing now?
So it's been a long haul. I'm on a lot of medication, and I'm taking a lot of therapy. EMDR is amazing for people like myself with buried childhood trauma. It's really helped me out a lot. Stuff that I might have struggled with for an entire week, I have taken care of in 30 minutes during therapy.
Awesome.
So that part's good. Yeah.
Have you? Let me ask you real quick. Have you connected with Recovering from Religion? Do you know about them?
I haven't yet.
I would highly encourage that. They have trained counselors that can really either walk you through some of these concepts, these ideas, either in a chat room or on the phone. If someone in the chat could put link up, please, recoveringfromreligion.org. They've done a lot. It really is helpful for folks like you and me and Thomas, who came out of highly indoctrinated fundamentalist upbringings. And it sounds like you've suffered a lot of trauma from that, Violet. And so I just want to see you get all the help that's available for you. Yeah,
I appreciate that. I'm doing. I'm like I said, I was a nurse. I'll never be a nurse again. That just took it out of me. The inhumanity of people, it just killed whatever little bit of nurse that was inside of me. I watched people refuse to come and see their nanas and their papas because they had a choice and they didn't want to wear a mask. So I was with their nana and papa when they died, and they used to visit.
Wow.
So that kind of crap right there killed my soul. And that's when, you know, I thought it was the end times and all this other shit. And all these movies, I've actually been able to, except for the last one, and it scares me, and I don't know why, because the other ones didn't scare me. But anyway, I watched those movies as an adult and as a child at the same time and demystified what the fears were.
Right.
And it really worked. For a lot of it, it really worked.
That's awesome.
But
Thomas,
this last
do you have,
one has to do with computer prophecies and all these barcodes and this and that. And so that's causing it for me to have problems with like emails and that kind of a thing. And that started when I first was having problems back in October at work.
I'd maybe quit watching those movies.
Check my email.
I'd maybe quit watching those movies, Violet. But Thomas, do you have any thoughts for Violet before we run too long on time here?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of curious with the last movie. It sounds very conspiratorial. I'm not sure what the name of the movie is or the claims in it, but I would
it was the last one was Sign of the Beast, and it was the 1970s and 80s.
Okay.
Okay.
Because one thing I would recommend looking into is find a good skeptic group. And I know that you have, we talked at the beginning of this show briefly about SciCon, which is run by the Center for Inquiry. But the Center for Inquiry has been putting out content basically debunking all kinds of different claims related to conspiracy theories. And it's not just religious. It's not a religious organization or an atheist organization. Basically, they look at a lot of this stuff that is pseudoscience or that is conspiratorial in nature, that's not backed up in any real solid evidence, or it's backed up in really faulty claims that fall apart when you dig deeper. A great place to start if you enjoy books would be The Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan. It's an excellent starting point to kind of start to gain the tools to think critically, and then just go from there. There's a lot of YouTubers and podcasters that get into this type of stuff when it comes to conspiracies and stuff. I know Brian Dunning had his podcast Skeptoid, where he would look into this type of thing. I know that the Skeptic's Guide to the Galaxy or Skeptic's Guide to the Universe?
Yeah.
They have a podcast that is amazing. They've covered like tons and tons and tons of these types of things, like the conspiracies related to, microchips and barcodes and the government, watching your every move. And like, there's some stuff that, like, there's certain things where there's elements of truth to, the government, the NSA is recording and screening a lot of our information. This was made apparent with a lot of the leaks with Edward Snowden, but they don't have to track you with microchips and vaccines to get that job done. They just look at what's being sent over.
Right.
Yeah. They've got our cell phone data.
They can just ping me.
And the other thing too is a lot of people will say things like, oh, they are watching, they are in charge. And it's like, okay, who is they? Like, who is this great mysterious them? Like, there are companies that are really powerful, that are really wealthy. There's oil companies that will lobby for certain, congressional bills to pass. There's, various people in pharmaceutical companies that they have their agenda, but there's not like this one overarching like person or circle of people that somehow are able to create this intricate Rube Goldberg device machine government that just perfectly flawlessly comes out with all these results based off of this evil plan. I think that that's a notion that's often put forth by religious people because they think it's a satanic agenda and they think that the devil is behind everything. And there's just no evidence for that. And the more that you actually study, like I studied political science and international studies, and the more that you learn about how ineffective governments are, the more that you realize that it's kind of a pipe dream to have a government that's efficient.
That's so true.
That effectively without leaks.
They can't get out of their own way, much
Yeah.
less spy on the whole world.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the easiest ways to debunk a conspiracy theory before even looking into it is asking yourself the question: if this conspiracy theory was actually true, how many people would have to be in on it to maintain the ruse? And then just
Right.
understanding human nature and how awful we are at keeping juicy secrets to ourselves.
Right.
You know, I think they said that if the moon landing were faked, it would have taken less than 6 days for that to come out by a
Right.
leak, based on how many people had to be involved. But the other thing
Back then,
too,
nowadays with Twitter, it'd be even faster.
I know, it'd be like 2 seconds. You know, there's some John Ralphie out there that can't just help but live stream all the deets. But the other thing too, like when it comes to the big boogeyman, shadow government, you know, puppeteering the world, is that is a conspiracy theory that has taken on a lot of different forms and a lot of different specifics, but it is sort of rooted in this history of anti-Semitism going back 100, 200, 1,000 years. It's this whole idea that of the Jews controlling everything. I mean, that was really, really popular in America.
It was one of the sources for the Holocaust.
Yeah, the Elders of Zion, which was really popular in the United States. And we see that resurface in the 80s and in the 90s and to this day. Yeah.
Pushing it.
So I think
Oh.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I just was talking to my aunt the other day, and she's religious. She's my dad's sister. And I said, how come when you're in church and you're little, they teach you the golden rule, and that's supposed to be the thing, and you're supposed to not lie and all these other things. But then when you grow up, you forget all that stuff, and then you just are mean. And I don't understand that.
Yeah.
You know, because apparently I am still a child as well. So that's why I have that perfect little, and so I was wondering why other people weren't feeling the same as me, you know, and why was my heart bleeding so much for people I don't even know, that it was going to cause me to actually have to go inpatient, you know, if I didn't knock it off. And I had to have a serious conversation with myself and say, hey, are all these people that you don't even know worth being in a psych ward?
No, not at all.
No.
Yeah, there's definitely a point where, like, empathy is a good thing, but having a crippling degree of empathy where you're unable to allocate allocate a proportionate amount of empathy to the causes that are nearest and dearest to you.
Yeah,
right.
There's a balance there, and you got to take care of yourself. Well, Violet, we appreciate. We're going to have to wrap up the show. We've got to be respectful of my guest time.
I want to say
sorry
one
about
note on
go ahead.
The conspiracy theories to what Genevieve was saying with trying to keep it a secret. These shadow governments and there's these huge elaborate things that somehow, you know, no one knows about, or everyone disappears and dies when they try to get the word out. One of the best comebacks I've heard to that, and please pardon my French, but it's, how can you expect for millions of different people working for thousands of different companies and organizations and governments, they're all somehow able to keep secret the fact that the earth is flat and that the moon landing is fake and all of this stuff, that NASA is just lying to you. And yet the president of the United States couldn't keep a blowjob a secret. It's
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, Justin, Violet, thank you so much for calling in. We
Yeah.
really hope that it was helpful, and please check out Recovering from Religion.
It was.
I think it'll
Thank
be
you
a
for the
great resource.
resources.
You bet. You take care and
Yeah.
call back anytime. Thanks for watching the show. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
take care.
I want to say thanks to Brian for his $10 super sticker, and I think I saw Toy Ranch $20 super sticker. Thank you for that. You guys, your support is amazing. Holy Kool-Aid, what before we wrap up here, I do want to get us out on time or close to it. What do you have coming up? What kind of content are you itching to create? What's on the horizon that you can share with us if it's not a big secret?
Yeah, so my two big upcoming videos right now are the first one is I did an interview with Dr. Josh Bowen.
Yeah.
And we dive deep into the historicity of the Bible, but from an angle that I haven't talked about on my show before. So we look at a lot of the origins of like the Pentateuch and the first 5 books of the Bible when it was written. And then we look at certain prophecies and failed prophecies and like technical elements that when you analyze the text, certain things don't quite add up the way that you would expect. And that's going to be a really fun video because it's animated. It's a longer video because there's a lot of meat in there, but it's very fast paced, well edited, animated, lots of, B-roll and images. So you can actually follow along. If you're super ADD, you can see all the visuals that make sense. And so that video is going to be fun. And that should be dropping here in the next few days. And then after that, I'm working on another Nothing Fails Like Bible History video, which is one of my most popular series where I do shorter videos that are maybe like 10 minutes long or something. And I really dive into the history and the archaeology of the ancient Near East. And I compare it to the biblical narrative and see if they match up. And when they don't, they don't. And I don't pull any punches.
No, you don't. I love the way you do it. You're very honest and thorough. Your research is absolutely thorough and spot on. But you're very kind about it. You're just putting out the facts here.
When
this
I
is what it
find
is.
something that is true, that the Bible makes a claim and there's evidence for it, then cool. Like there's stuff in the Bible that's like, oh yeah, there absolutely was this event, or there was this king, or there was this guy who did this thing, and it bears out in the archaeological record. And then there's other stuff that it's like, it's not true. And I think it would be kind of two-faced and hypocritical of me if I only showed one side and didn't ever acknowledge that there's aspects that are true. And like, I'll say like, yeah, there was probably a guy named King Hezekiah. We found, a seal, we found a tunnel, we found inscriptions, we found other people talking about this guy. Like the story doesn't quite match up. There's elements that are a little iffy.
Yeah. But
if I really want to go where the truth leads, then I'm happy to admit when there's stuff in the Bible that's true. I catch flack for not being a mythicist. And I think mythicism is kind of conspiratorial a little bit. If you're using the scientific, or if you're using the historical method equally for all characters, then I think, there probably was a dude named Jesus. Does that mean that I have to believe that all the miracles are true and that he rose from the dead and that all of the events that they say about his life actually happened and that none of them are later attributions to him or like added on? No, like I think legends spring up. That's not abnormal. We have that stuff for King Arthur and Robin Hood and a million other people. And so I will acknowledge things and give Christians, credit and give them, stuff that I think is fair, but I'm not willing to say, oh yes, it is literal. It's divinely inspired. It is the word of God. It's inerrant. Hell no. Like that's not where the evidence is pointing. And when it doesn't point that way, I'm happy to call it out. Yeah.
That's good stuff. I'm going to do a series of videos where I interview the 500 witnesses to the resurrection of Christ because they're all in heaven, and I found a way to talk to them. So this is going to blow the minds of everyone.
Yeah, if you find any of them, send them my way because they're supposed to. Some of the disciples are supposed to still be alive because Jesus said he would come back in their lifetime.
That's what he said.
They're just strangers on a bus. I'm sure of it.
But listen,
next to him on a plane somewhere.
Yeah, Thomas, we'll be seeing you in less than 2 weeks at the Better Conference, folks. If you can, please come. It's going to be a blast. Going to be a lot of good content there. Good talks, good panels. I love the schedule they put together, so it's going to be a lot of fun. And if we don't see you guys there, we'll see you somewhere down the road. But Thomas, it's been so great to have you on, man. I felt like we could have talked another 2 hours, but I want to get you.
It's always a blast, Dave. And
yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing you here in a couple weeks, and I'll have to grab a beer or something. And
yeah, we'll definitely do that and catch up and share some life together. Grab some moments. I'm always looking for those moments. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure having you on, the one and only Holy Kool-Aid, with some incredible content on YouTube. You guys, if you haven't followed his stuff yet, please do. You'll be impressed. Genevieve, good to see you as always. Folks, thanks for tuning in for another great show. We'll see you next week.
And subscribe to this channel.
Subscribe.
Yeah.
That's it.